Thank you so much for joining me today on Catholics Under Construction. Today, I'm going to be giving you an overview of sacrifice and temple worship. So, sacrifice meaning the ritual act of offering to God as an outward manifestation of our veneration for Him. Strictly speaking, the offering does not become a sacrifice until a real change takes place within that object, right? So, an example being it needs to be slayed, the blood being shed, burning it, pouring it out, etc., etc. Sacrifices themselves typically take place on altar. So again, the ritual act of offering to God as an outward manifestation of our veneration to Him. So it's the act taken to offer an object out of love for God. What we do to the object that takes it as an object and makes it an actual sacrifice is making a change whereby we either kill it, shed its blood, burn it, or pour it out. Now let's talk about the Mosaic sacrifices. Now there are 5 sacrifices or offerings, and they're for different and varying things. But today I only want to focus on 2 of them. The first one is a burnt offering. A burnt offering is the sacrifice that is made for atonement of one's sin. Now this is normally the animal used as either a calf, a ram, or a lamb. The second sacrifice I want to focus on is a sin offering. The sin offering is for purification. The greater the sin, the greater the animal that will be sacrificed for the forgiveness of sin. This is primarily regarded as a ritual impurity. So you're sacrificing for your ritual impurity. This is not the same effect or grace one receives today from the sacrament of confession. This foreshadows confession. During periods of time, sacrifice was centralized and sometimes it was allowed to be decentralized. Leviticus chapter 17 calls for a centralizing of sacrifice. Ultimately, one day, these sacrifices would only take place in the temple. Since I just mentioned temples, let's move on to temple worship. As it pertains to temple worship, I want you to remember the number 2. First temple, second temple. There are 3 sections in the temple: the outer court, the inner court, and what is called the Holy of Holies. The Holy of Holies is where the Ark of the Covenant sat. During Passover, so this would be once a year, only the high priest was allowed to go into the Holy of Holies. He would offer the sacrifice for the atonement of God's chosen people, and afterwards he would come out and say the divine name. So it would only be said once a year. The high priest would come out of the Holy of Holies, say the divine name, and everyone would hit the floor in reverence to the divine name. This gives you some perspective on how Jews reverence God's name. Given their reverence for the divine name, you now understand why it is incredibly offensive to say the divine name Yahweh in front of your Jewish friends. So let's talk about those 2 temples again. You have the first temple, the second temple. The first temple was built in about 961 BC. So if we're just ballparking it, about 1000 BC. Okay, about 1000 BC, Solomon builds the temple. This is why typically it's attributed as Solomon's temple. That's the first temple, the first of 2 temples. Remember earlier I said there would be 2 temples. First temple, built 961, Solomon's temple, first temple, about 1000 BC. Okay, that first temple, Solomon's temple, was destroyed by the Babylonians in 587 BC. So that first temple, Solomon's temple, was built in 1000 BC and destroyed in about 587 BC. The second temple was built in 537 BC. So that second temple, the second, one of the 2 temples, the second one, was built in 537 BC. It was destroyed in 70 AD by Rome. Now, considering these are long spans of time between the 2 temples, and they are the first temple and second temple, should be easy enough because there's long periods of time between the building and destruction of each temple. It's not uncommon to hear them referred to as temple eras. So first temple Judaism, second temple Judaism. So if you hear somebody talking about second temple Judaism, you know that ranges from 537 BC to 70 AD. And then obviously about a thou, I like saying a thou, 961 BC all the way to 537 BC is First Temple Judaism, or First Temple. And so you did hear me talk about with the Second Temple that it was around from 537 BC until 70 AD. Now, that is a very important time distinction. Please, 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 70 AD, 70, 70, 70, 70, 70, 70 AD. It is incredibly important that you remember that number because that's going to be helpful later on in your studies. Again, this is just an overview, but this is hopefully going to help bridge some gaps and maybe excite you to, read the scriptures a little bit further. But the reason why that's so important, 70 AD, is you can kind of see as you read through the New Testament where you are in time based off of if there's a reference to the temple in present tense, right? So if in the New Testament you're hearing a reference to the temple and it's in a present tense, it has to be before 70 AD. Now, if it's used in a past tense, then for example, it has to be after 70 AD. So there's a little fun fact for you that you can take away. So when you're hearing the readings in Mass, or when you are in your personal biblical scholarship reading through, go, oh yeah, okay, so this has to be prior to 70 AD. So I hope that's helpful. So again, there are two temples, two eras. There's an outer court, an inner court, the Holy of Holies. First temple built about a thou, knocked down about 500 BC. Again, this is just an overview, so please don't be offended when I'm taking liberties with, the approximation. But Second Temple, 537 BC. Okay, it's up. It gets knocked down 70 AD by the Romans. Okay, and so First Temple Judaism would be 961 to about 587 BC. Second Temple Judaism would be 537 to 70 AD. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope this kind of helps get you excited, bridge some gaps so that it's just so much more enjoyable when you read the Bible. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day. God bless you.